Thanks for tuning in. This is ARIRANG News. It's 2 p.m. here in Seoul, and I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. First, a look at the stories we're following at this hour. South Korea holds separate meetings with China and the U.S. this week. Regional issues of mutual interest, including Washington's missile defense system, are reportedly up for discussion. A majority of Korean manufacturers saw their sales and profits take a negative turn last year. Some are calling for more government support, while others say the firms are in need of reform. And 3 British men in their teens who tried to join the Islamic State militant group are now back in London. Their identities have not yet been disclosed. South Korea's foreign ministry officials are set to engage in back-to-back diplomacy with China and the U.S. Watchers say Seoul could find itself in a tough spot with issues like Washington's THAAD missile defense system and China's Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank on the table of discussion. ARIRANG's Hwang Sung-hee has the story.
Korea could find itself tangled between 2 superpowers following its back-to-back meetings with China and the United States this week. China's Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs Liu Jianchao held talks with senior officials in Seoul on Monday. Liu reportedly opposed the possible deployment of the Washington-led THAAD missile defense system in South Korea, while asking for Seoul's participation in China's Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell, who visits Seoul's foreign ministry on Tuesday, is expected to ask for the opposite. Although Seoul and Washington say there have been no official discussions on THAAD, the U.S. Forces Korea said last Thursday that it conducted site surveys on where to deploy the missile defense system. Beijing is against the deployment over concerns that its radar system, which can cover 1,000 kilometers, could be used to monitor mainland China. The AIIB, aimed at creating a new financial order centered around China, is opposed by the U.S. because it believes Beijing could use the bank for political purposes. Seoul will reportedly make its final decision on joining this new financial institution later this month. But an official at South Korea's foreign ministry says Russell's visit to Seoul has nothing to do with the THAAD deployment nor China's AIIB. He said the U.S. official's visit is likely aimed at checking up on U.S. Ambassador to Korea Mark Lippert in person and to send a message that the South Korea-U.S. alliance remains as strong as ever. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, senior officials from Korea and Japan are set to hold talks aimed at resolving the issue of Tokyo's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Seoul's foreign ministry says Korea's chief delegate Lee Sang-deok will meet with his Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara in Seoul on this Monday. It's the 7th meeting of its kind, but the two sides have yet to make any substantial progress on the highly sensitive subject. Seoul has called on Tokyo to take sincere steps to compensate the aging victims, but Japan insists the matter was settled through a bilateral treaty signed in 1965. Representatives from the government, the presidential office, and the ruling Saenuri Party have agreed to raise the minimum wage to a suitable level. The 3 groups failed, however, to define what that suitable is during their meeting on Sunday. Hyun Jung-taek, a senior presidential secretary, called for cooperation to boost the economy and stabilize people's livelihoods. Take a listen.
The government, ruling party, and the presidential office should work together to pass pending bills that would create more jobs for our people, and especially for the younger generation.
Widely expected but not discussed at the meeting was Washington's possible deployment of a missile defense system to South Korea. Lawmakers are divided on that topic, with conservatives supporting the system while liberals oppose it, saying it would undermine Korea's sovereignty. Now, Korea has opened its 7th Innovation Center, this time in the southeastern port city of Busan. In cooperation with the retail giant Lotte Group, the Busan Center will focus on fostering specialized personnel and supporting startups in the sectors of retail, film, and Internet of Things. The center will set up a $200 million fund to have merchandising experts offer counseling on product development and utilize the government and Lotte Lotte's retail network to give support in commercializing the products. Working with the government's recently opened Cultural Creativity Complex in Seoul, the center will operate movie theaters to showcase its own innovative films. The average growth rate of sales of non-financial listed companies has been decreasing for the past couple of years, and last year it actually turned negative, with many manufacturers seeing their sales and profits slump. Song Ji-sun has more.
Korean manufacturers entered a phase of negative growth last year. According to the Federation of Korean Industries on Monday, sales of over 1,000 listed companies decreased 1.5% as of the third quarter of last year, compared to the same period a year earlier. Profit growth also slowed to negative 18% last year, from a 1% growth in 2013. The trend was more noticeable among manufacturers, which account for more than 70% of the firms surveyed. Their combined profit dropped from $75 to $62 billion, a 23% fall from a 9% expansion in 2013. 7 out of Korea's 10 largest companies in terms of revenue saw their profits drop 30% on average on slumping domestic demand, coupled with slowing exports due to weakened global demand. And that includes Korea's largest companies and conglomerates like Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor Group, SK, and Hanwha. Officials at the Federation of Korean Industries say manufacturers need government support for more business-friendly policies. They say such a slowdown could dent the pace of new job creation and facilities investment. Industry analysts point out that companies first need to restructure and cut costs to improve their profitability. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
And with the protracted economic slump, last year was a bad year for Korean companies on another aspect. In 2014, the number of Korean firms recording a decline in their credit ratings reached a 15-year high. The Korea Investors Service on Monday says only 15 of some 370 companies saw their credit ratings rise last year, while about 40 suffered a downgrade. The figures represent the lowest and highest within a 15-year period since 1999. By industry, manufacturing companies saw their largest number of ratings downgraded, followed by the services and financial sectors. The more shares held by foreign investors last year, the more likely it was the companies they invested in boosted their dividend payouts last year. This is in contrast to the lower dividend payments typical of Korean companies. Local market analyst WiseFN says of the combined $14 billion in dividends paid by 885 listed companies in Korea, around $5 billion was paid to foreigners. That's a near 19% increase from the previous year. This was more evident with Korean smartphone maker Samsung Electronics, which had 52% of its shares held by foreign investors last year, an increase of 3% from the previous year. Now, the competition in the job market for college graduates is growing fiercer by the day. It's getting to a point where students have to fight hard to get into school clubs focused on enhancing skills you would get at real workplaces. Kwon So-ah reports.
One of the excitements for a Korean freshman is participating in a 동아리, the Korean word for an extracurricular club at a university. And these days, the most popular clubs are those that will help students prepare for getting a job, such as management or startup clubs.
The open spots in our club filled up in just 5 days.
That's led to a fierce competition for entry to the clubs. What you see here is not a job interview. These seniors are testing freshmen on whether they are qualified to be a member of their group. All this competition seems to have helped, as many club members have successfully entered the workforce.
We believe that once we go through the club's curriculum and events, we build up the knowledge and traits that are needed in the workplace.
The rise in the number of extracurricular clubs has followed the rise in Korea's youth unemployment rate, a problem that can't be solved solely by higher education. Despite a university entrance rate of around 70%, statistics show that it's not easy for graduates to get a decent job. According to a recent study, less than 6 out of 10 university students were confident they would get the job they wanted. The clubs may help with the job hunt and they may be popular, but there are also concerns.
A university is not only a place to prepare for getting a job, it's a place to build up one's knowledge of the humanities and social relations.
Some have also expressed the worry that university students will have to face employment worries after graduation in any case, and that in the meantime, they won't get to enjoy just being a student. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
If you're thinking about going green with your next auto purchase, this next report could help you make up your mind. On this week's Industry Insight, Arirang's Kim Ji-yeon looks into the nation's hybrid car market.
Despite falling oil prices, Korean drivers are increasingly turning to hybrid cars, powered by a combination of gas and electricity. Around 5,200 hybrids were sold during the first 2 months of this year alone, led by Hyundai Motor's Sonata Hybrid. The driving force behind the hybrid's popularity is a change in public perception, as myths surrounding hybrids are debunked. When consumers hear the words electric vehicle, they think of plugs, cords, and wall sockets. But today's hybrids don't necessarily have to be plugged in. Auto engineers have developed a system known as regenerative braking that helps cars retrieve and store energy.
Energy normally lost when the car slows down or stops is reclaimed and sent to the rechargeable batteries. And then the gas engine also transfers energy to the batteries automatically.
Another common misconception is that hybrid drivers are paying more just to save the environment. But in reality, it's not all about altruism. Drivers can actually save when they go hybrid. The sticker price for a Sonata Hybrid starts at $27,000, just $1,800 more than a non-hybrid Sonata. Assuming gas price remains at $1.30 per liter, Hyundai says consumers can save nearly $3,200 over a 5-year period.
A drop in gas prices doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be cheaper to keep a gasoline-based model. Right now, gas is at about $1,471 or $1.30 per liter, which means it's not cheap. And consumers think the low oil price trend isn't going to last long.
Also, drivers who buy a hybrid this year will be eligible for various local tax cuts and government subsidies. With hybrids that emit less than 97 grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer, which includes the Sonata Hybrid, Toyota's Prius line, the Lexus CT200H, and the Ford Fusion, drivers can save up to $3,600. Hyundai says it plans to boost the Sonata Hybrid's fuel efficiency by 25%. It's also planning to expand its lineup to draw the average driver, starting with its first plug-in hybrid set to debut at the Seoul Motor Show in April. Hyundai Motor Group Chairman Jung Mong-gu laid out plans to invest $73 billion into its facilities and R&D divisions through 2018. 85% of that will go towards improving standards, including plans to develop future hybrids. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012, for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The annual session of China's top legislative body came to a close on Sunday. One of the key areas of focus this year was the economy, how it plans to push ahead with sweeping reforms and reach a growth target of 7%. Son Jung-in tells us more.
This year's National People's Congress session came to an end Sunday with a focus on maintaining the policy direction of what the leadership called the new normal. Under the conditions, the government aims to balance steady growth in a law-based society, which are the strategic goals President Xi Jinping has stuck to since taking power in 2012. The economy dominated the agenda as it comes at a time when China is wrestling with a continuing economic slowdown. Premier Li Keqiang said Beijing was prepared to take action to stimulate the economy and boost the market confidence, but warned the country would struggle to meet its annual growth target of around 7% this year.
It is true that we have adjusted downward our GDP growth target, but it will by no means easy for us to meet this target because China's economic aggregate keeps expanding.
Lawmakers also put emphasis on deepening reforms and promoting the rule of law. The session reviewed a draft amendment to the country's legislation law in which it seeks to set clear limits on administrative power in order to protect public interest. The top judiciary also vowed greater justice by promoting transparency and sharing information between courts dotted around the country. Environmental protection was also high on the agenda as the Environment Ministry vowed comprehensive efforts to implement tougher measures against polluting firms. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
3 British teenagers are back in London now after an attempt to join Islamic State in Syria over the weekend was foiled. They were released after being questioned on suspicions that they were plotting terrorist acts. Shin Se-min has more.
It all happened over the weekend. 3 British teenagers suspected of trying to enter Syria to join the Islamic State militant group have been returned to the UK and were released on bail late Sunday local time after being questioned by counterterrorism officers for 24 hours. The suspects, 2 17-year-old boys and 1 19-year-old man, all from London, were first reported missing late Friday night and were stopped by authorities in Turkey on suspicion of preparation to commit terrorist acts. It marks the first successful cooperation between the two countries on this issue, as the suspects were stopped by intelligence officials in Turkey after being alerted by British officials. The identities of the 3 haven't been disclosed. This case comes a matter of weeks after 3 British teenage girls traveled to join the jihadist group in Syria. Around 600 British nationals are believed to have already gone to Syria or Iraq to take up arms or become jihadi brides. Over in Iraq, the joint military Shia militia operation to free the city of Tikrit is taking a breather as they wait for reinforcements before they push to retake the entire city. Troops there have been slowed by sniper fire and booby-trap buildings. Meanwhile, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters are reporting that Islamic State militants could be using chlorine as chemical weapons in Iraq's north and west. Security forces have sealed off the area where the containers were found and alerted Baghdad authorities. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Authorities in the U.S. state of Missouri have made an arrest in last week's shooting in Ferguson, which left 2 police officers hit and wounded. 20-year-old Jeffrey Williams was arrested and charged on Saturday local time with 2 counts of first-degree assault, among others. St. Louis County Prosecutor Robert McCulloch said Williams had fired the shots from a moving vehicle outside the Ferguson police headquarters where protesters were gathered. Authorities will now try to determine the motive behind the shooting as Williams, who was on probation, claimed his target was not the officers but someone in the crowd with whom he had a dispute. A new documentary aired on Russian state TV is showing President Vladimir Putin being more aggressive on Crimea and Ukraine, contrary to Moscow's articulated stance thus far. In the piece titled The Path to the Motherland, President Putin says he had in fact ordered Crimea's annexation weeks before the region held a referendum. In Sunday's run of the documentary, the Russian leader says he was ready to put nuclear weapons on standby during the escalating tensions over Crimea and Ukraine, in both cases explaining that the lives of Russians and Moscow-backed leader Viktor Yanukovych were under threat. President Putin himself, meanwhile, has been out of the public eye since canceling a summit meeting with his Belarusian and Kazakh counterparts last week, sparking rumors that he was ill or out of the country. One of the few video artists to have truly broken through to mainstream audiences has arrived in Seoul for a solo exhibition, and our Im Yoon-hee joins us with a preview today. Hello there, Yoon-hee.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Sorry, good afternoon already. That's right. So Bill Viola, he's one of the pioneering video artists at a time when video art really didn't seem to become an art form. Now he's thus gone on to become one of the most prominent figures in the field, even being nicknamed the Remembrant of video art. Now his works address different ideas of birth, death, suffering, and transcendence, and he's since brought some of those works to Seoul to check out. Have a look in this next report.
Cascading in the wrong direction. Liquid flows from black to red to opaque white, finally becoming crystal clear. American video artist Bill Viola has for many years experimented with time and the human experience, and the relationship between the two. He also points out how mass media has become a tool by which to witness the suffering of humanity.
Well, Buddha said, of course, all life is suffering. And a lot of other cultures have that same idea. Because we need to suffer.
There's a unique characteristic to all of his works. Images that invoke strong emotions and hints at a spiritual world in the midst of reality.
It's filmed very quickly, but it's shown at normal speed, so 1 minute is stretched to 10 minutes or even 80 minutes. It's a very special experience for the audience.
Viola even recreates the suffering of 4 martyrs, tortured by the 4 elements. And even though his works contain images of pain and sorrow, Viola wants them to represent the ideas of perseverance, endurance, and sacrifice in our mass media-dominated world.
And you say he has some special relationship with the world-renowned video artist Baek Nam-jun.
Right, that's absolutely right. So he actually served as an assistant to the legendary video artist Baek Nam-jun, but he himself, Viola, has since gone on to become another leading figure as well. He's considered a leader when it comes to any type of art form that deals with electronics, different types of sound and video technology. Now, of the works that you just saw in the report, one is Water Martyr, and that's one of a 4-part installation work that is permanently being shown at the St. Paul's Cathedral in London. So he really is a prominent figure around the world.
And it seems like he's using water a lot in his works. Does he say why or explain?
Right, so there's an interesting story behind that. So when he was 6 years old, he says that he had a near-death drowning experience, and instead of walking away traumatized like most people would have, he said he found it profoundly beautiful, and he said he found that encounter with the water world just absolutely beautiful, and he could never forget it. And so since then, you see a lot of the water influence in his work and in his life.
Right. He seems to have strong mentality if you hear about that story just there.
Right.
All right. Thank you very much, Yoon-hee, for coming in today and sharing this report with us.
My pleasure.
Hello, Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Today is unseasonably mild considering that we're still in the middle of March. Seoul can expect a milder day than yesterday with readings about 3 degrees higher, while Gwangju will be topping up beyond 20s, which we don't usually see this until May. Now, along with the mild conditions, we can expect mostly clear skies, although there will be times when fine dust levels will be fairly high here in Seoul as well as for Gangwon-do province. Now, looking at the rest of the week, mild readings are expected throughout, and even though we do have some rain in the forecast on Wednesday, but hopefully that will relieve us from this ongoing dry weather. Now, taking a look at the readings for today, Seoul will peak up to 16 this afternoon, while the southern regions such as Gwangju and Busan will top to 22 and 18 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 17 as well. Dokdo hits down to 14, while Mount Keungang is a bit cooler at 7 degrees. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Another edition of ARIRANG News coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time.